Dan, now that you've finished the Argonautilus series of plays, um, I wanted to ask you why I know that you've done a lot of myths and you've done a lot of legends and sort of folk tales and what have you. So why Jason? Why the Argonauticus? Why this one and why now?
Well, I've always wanted to. One of my favorite movies growing up was Jason and the Argonauts, the Ray Harryhausen film.
When did you see that
Well,
the first time?
I first saw it on TV, which would have I probably was 5 or 6 years old. The movie came out in like I believe 63, 65, something like that, 63,
Yeah.
64. But when I was a kid, there were theaters in New York City that were 24-hour theaters. And what would happen is overnight would be the porno. The porno would play from like midnight till 8 in the morning or 6 in the morning. From 6, 7, 8 in the morning till maybe 10 in the morning, they would replay old kids stuff, which would be old Bugs Bunny cartoons. Because in these days, you would have those old cans. And what would happen is over the course of 10, 15, 20 years, the distributors for certain movies might never come to pick up their movies after they were released, the movie released. So someone might have, in 71, 72, they might have an old can of a movie that's a decade old, and
Mhm.
they just use it as their property. They would show this. Then from like 10 to uh, noon, there might be, some real old-time silent movies, or maybe they throw in some other crap, and then they would have the main features again for the main 12 hours. So when I was a kid, what would happen is to save money, a lot of these small independent theaters didn't have ushers or whatnot, but they would pay local kids. They'd give them a mop and a broom, and they'd give $2 or $3 to clean out the theater. So it might be 4 or 5 young kids sweeping up the popcorn, the dirty condoms, or whatever it might be on the floor, and dump it. And then not only would you get $2 or $3, but the guy would say, well, you guys can come in anytime you want to watch, the movies, want to watch a Bugs Bunny movie on screen. And so one of the times I remember was Jason and the Argonauts, and I remember having seen it on TV. I only had black and white TV until 1986,
Mm.
so it was a huge thing. And this was generally considered a B movie. But over the years, as I watched it a few more times on DVD and whatnot, it's really a good movie. I don't know if I would call it a great movie. You could say it's a great B movie. But one of the things that it does so well, aside from the Harryhausen dreamlike monsters that sort of move with the stop
Yeah.
motion, is it captures the rhythms of the original Greek myths and also the later Sinbad films. It captures it so well. You would have a brief scene, two people meet, one of them is in trouble, the other one saves it. You are my friend for life. That's all you get for that, Or
Yeah.
you would get in that particular movie you have Medea and Jason. He saves her from as she's floating in on a piece of wood from her destroyed ship from the clashing rocks, that the Symplegades that go back and forth and crush ships.
Hmm.
And within 5 minutes of screen time, they're in love, and,
Yeah.
and that is so much like the Greek stuff. There's no filler. It's just pure action, pure plot driven in the best sense. And
Mm.
what makes the movie stand out are the things like the Harryhausen features, the fact that you get Hercules. In the film, it's called Hercules. I call him the original Greek Heracles. Comes in,
Yeah.
does a few things, then midway, Hercules, one of the biggest names in Greek mythology, just disappears from the movie, and he goes off on his 12 labors or 10 labors that became 12 labors. And
Yeah.
so I always wanted to do something with it, and it's just a matter of finding the form. Like I've said, and I probably told you, and I know I've done it with other people, is like it took me 20 years to get the right form for the Vincetti brothers that became a novel. And it was just feeling I'd done the Great Khans, I'd done Alexander, Cyrus, and Sargon the Great. I'd done the Arthurian stuff, and I said, well, let me do Jason and the Argonauts. So basically, what I did in the 5 plays, the first 3 plays are the Argonaut searching for the Golden Fleece. It's basically a retelling of the story from the Argonautica by Apollonius Rhodius
Yeah.
that became the basis of the movie, and then the fourth play is my rework of Medea, the play Medea, and then
Yeah.
and
That's the play by Aeschylus, isn't it?
Aeschylus, yeah, and he also Seneca did a version of it, I believe.
There's been quite a few variations of that one.
And Jeffers,
So,
Robinson Jeffers, most recently. And I just come off of doing a play in the middle of these 5 plays. I was doing poet plays. So one of the poet plays was Robinson Jeffers, who did the modern adaptation of Medea. And then the final 5th play is just my dealing with Jason dealing with growing older, because as I always like to do, I try to find the flaws in certain things and fix them. But we can talk about that as we go on.
yeah, well, there's a few things I could ask you about this. I mean, for one thing, the Harryhausen film. The Harryhausen films, as you were saying, they have this kind of almost magical quality that almost invites you to sort of enter into them imaginatively. And you know, the first Harryhausen films I ever saw were the Sinbad films,
Yeah.
which I think are fantastic.
With Tom Baker, the Doctor Who, Tom Baker, then before he became the Doctor.
I never realized that. But but also you know, I suppose the question really was, I suppose, why now of all times for the Jason and the Argonauts? Was there something that brought them to the forefront of your mind? Were you reminded of them somehow? I mean, because you've been doing quite a few of these mythic, sort of legendary sort of plays and stories and whatnot. So I suppose why now is really, was it just kind of like, well, I haven't done that yet, or was something did something kind of alert you to it?
Well, mostly that what you just said. But by the time I got to the 4th play, the Medea play, they had overturned Roe versus Wade here in the United States, making abortion illegal in you know, more than half the states, all the red you know, inbred states, and so I was like, well, I need to show that this is one. I mean, the major flaw with Medea, putting aside the Jason and the Argonauts and the Golden Fleece leading up to the Medea play, is that it never struck me as true that Medea would kill her 2 sons. She actually had, I think there were 3 sons in the original 2. I gave a name to the 3rd oldest boy, Thessalus, but it never struck me as true. If she was going to lash out at Jason, that would be the last thing it would do. And what it does, it takes an up to then character that you're sympathetic to and makes a double murderess of her own children, which then flips it on Jason. And there's only one reason that the Greeks who would do that, Aeschylus, these were all men. And so in their minds, even though Aeschylus or Seneca or anyone who's writing these plays probably didn't recognize it, but that's a typical male thing to do. Let's blame the woman, even though Jason is clearly the bad guy in the play, or one of the bad guys. But let's flip it at the end and make Medea bad. And so Medea is, along with Lady Macbeth, one of the 2 great supposed evil women of drama.
Yeah.
And it just never sat well with me. So in that particular 4th play, that was one of the things to give her a more realistic reason for what she does.
Yeah, I suppose the Argonautica is quite a strange sort of Homeric sort of myth in that sense. It's sort of classical scholars. It's not very popular with them.
Yes, and there's a I think a basic reason for that. You know, you've got the Iliad, the Odyssey, you've got the Aeneid. They're the big 3 of Greek epoche. But Lucan's The Civil War is just as good. I haven't read it for many years, but I remember it being good. Maybe I'll have to redo that at some point too. And then the Argonautica.
You turned me on to Lucan in that respect. But the Argonautica, it seems very weird. In preparation for this, I was sort of skimming through it and trying to read some academe about it. I mean, it has this episodic quality. A lack of characterization. It's sort of a tendency towards digression, and scholars seem to say that, you know, the most dramatically resonant part of it is the Medea, whole vengeance plot. But again, it has the same kind of superficiality. I mean, even now, kind of, there's this, I suppose, a whole feminist critique of, Medea. I mean, as you're alluding to, I suppose, kind of, is that a really fair thing to just to sort of, is that it doesn't seem to have a lot of realism to it, but yeah.
I was recently interviewing a guy. In fact, my last interview that I did last week, a guy who's a sci-fi writer and a YouTuber, and I think it was in that interview, or maybe one I did with Alex Sheremit, that his thing went down. We got to redo it. His internet went down. But I was talking about. Have you ever heard of Julian Jaynes?
Yes, he wrote the Bicameral Mind.
Yeah. So one of the things that is at the basis of his belief is that up until between 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, that human beings were not sentient, meaning that they were basically glorified zombies. And one of the bases that Jaynes used for this is ancient texts, whether it was Gilgamesh, whether it was
yes. I seem to recall him saying that people would have temporal cross chatter, that we lack some sort of integral part of our brains, and that this cross chatter would be experienced as the voice of the gods.
But more cogent to getting back to the Medea thing is these guys who are writing this could make all of the, a character could be going in this particular direction and then all of a sudden make a U-turn, which wouldn't happen in real life, but it could be justified with that Jaynesian view of a lack of a deeper sentience, because they are just playthings, and human beings will playthings of the gods, the characters will playthings of the author, and so on and so forth.
This is a very controversial theory, though, Dan, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't buy it, but that is one of the things that Jaynes based his theory on in looking at ancient texts. And part of the problem is, like many people who are not creative and who simply have a scientific mindset, is they don't basically understand creativity, or something that you can just imagine things.
Yeah.
In modern day times, we have the exact opposite. Is that, oh my God, you are a gay Briton. You couldn't possibly understand what it's like to be, Laotian Buddhist or whatnot, because you're not that. Well, you can actually think about it. You have an imagination. Maybe you could paint from that point of view, or I can write from that point of view. But there's always this stuff, whether it's old dead white men like Julian Jaynes or modern PC elitists that don't think that look at things, look at their flaws, and instead of just saying, well, it's just flawed because they weren't as good at writing 3,000-4,000 years ago, it must have been something wrong with their brains. No, just like in 5,000 years, if humanity survives, there'll be people that'll be so far beyond me or Picasso or Shakespeare or Kubrick in their various forms and art forms yet to be thought of. It's not that we're lacking, it's just we're not there yet.